Welcome to Forward Thinking, the podcast from Fox Williams, where we cut through complexity to bring you practical insights from the people shaping modern business. Joining me today is Bryan Shaw, corporate partner here at Fox Williams. He specialises in private equity and works closely with the search fund community. Bryan has a timely warning for any searcher in the middle of or approaching an acquisition. Think very carefully before agreeing to share a solicitor with your investor. It might feel like the practical choice, but as Bryan explains, the consequences can be far more costly than the legal fees you think you're saving. So, to kick off, you work with a lot of searchers going through acquisitions. What's the single most common mistake you see them make when it comes to legal advice?
What I find is a common mistake from searchers is engaging lawyers too late in the process. Too often, the searchers will come to us or to their law firm with a signed heads of terms or signed terms and ask the lawyer simply to paper it up. It's too late by then. We need early engagement, be that via just simple phone calls or texts or emails. Get us involved earlier rather than later. Because if it's too late, it's very hard for us to put the genie back into the bottle, as they say. Worse yet, I've seen, is engaging the wrong lawyers. Too often we see searchers engaging the lawyer that drafted their will or drafted their conveyancing or whatnot. You need to have a proper corporate M&A and investment lawyer on your side in both the search fund process and also the acquisition.
And leading on from that, when an investor suggests sharing a law firm, on the surface, it sounds like a win-win. It could be cheaper, faster, and simpler. Why should that actually be a red flag for a searcher?
Absolutely. It may not, in fact, it probably won't be cheaper, and I'm sure we'll cover that later in the podcast. A good analogy I have for this is if you think about your local football team and you turn up to the pitch, you've got two sets of teams, but the referee's missing. And the other side say, it's okay, our manager will be the referee of this match. Seems like a good idea, but ultimately, how can that manager be truly independent when he's refereeing the two teams? And it's a very similar concept when your investor asks to share lawyers, because ultimately their interests are not always aligned with yours as a searcher.
And as investors and searchers are both trying to get a deal done, where exactly do their interests start to pull in different directions?
So it's a very good question. When a search fund spots an opportunity and then agrees heads of terms and is ready to acquire a business, there are effectively two transactions at that point in time. You have the acquisition itself and the investment from the investors into your search vehicle. And so on the M&A, on the acquisition itself, there are some divergence of interest there. So for instance, the investor will be looking for typically an exit within 3 to 5 years of that company, where the searcher typically want to operate that business for a long period of time. That could be decades. So in terms of the acquisition terms, the M&A terms, there may be misalignment there in terms of on the way in and also on the way out. And so that comes down to the structure of the deal itself. The searcher may want earn-outs over a longer period of time, whereas the investor may want shorter or no earn-outs. And so there's definitely a divergence there. The other, as I mentioned, you've got the M&A work, and then you have the investment side of the transaction. And that is really where the interests diverge, because the investor is investing into your vehicle as a searcher. And the investor, by their very nature, they want, as said, a return on their investment. And how do they do that? They often will have what we call control rights or veto rights in the agreements. Now, you as a searcher want as much freedom as you can to run the business as you see fit, but the investor wants restrictions on that. So there's an immediate tension there. You're looking at there's vesting, what they call vesting. So you're right, as a searcher, you want your equity to vest as quickly as possible, whereas the investor wants your equity to vest over a longer period of time, or some performance metrics or whatnot. And so again, divergence of interests. Another crucial or critical divergence around if you ever left the business, what they call leaver provisions. And these are called good and bad leaver, or good and bad and very bad leaver. And so defining what each of those levers are, that makes a big difference in terms of in 2-3 years, let's say You want to leave for whatever reason, but the investor has invested in you as a searcher. He or she doesn't want you to leave. How does that resolved? So there's, again, conflicts there. There's a lawyer cannot act on both sides of that negotiation. There's a crystal clear conflict there. And there are others, but we don't have time for all of those on the podcast.
Thank you. And are you able to walk us through what can actually go wrong mid-transaction? For example, if a conflict of interest surfaces and the law firm has to step back.
Yes, an example that we just spoke about in terms of lever provisions. If it comes to a point when the investor and the searcher come together, all good intentions. Everyone that's happy, everyone's excited. You're about to enter this new venture. You're all aligned. You all think you're aligned. What we always say is, lawyers' jobs is to draft for the divorce, not the marriage. And it's unfortunate, but that is our job. And so where it comes to a point, if the searcher wants a good lever to say one thing and the investor wants it to say something else, the lawyer legally cannot act for both parties. There is a clear conflict of interest, and the lawyer will need to step down. Under the SRA regulation, they will need to step down from acting for either one or even both parties. And so you can imagine you're in the middle of negotiations for the acquisition and the investment. All these things have taken many months to get to this point. Many months, sometimes years to get to this point. You're at a crescendo of the deal. The deal is at it's 11 o'clock, 2 minutes to midnight, and all of a sudden your lawyer has to step away. You then need to find new lawyers. The investor may need to find new lawyers. This all takes time, everyone getting back up to speed. The seller, the company you're looking to buy, the whole reason why you're together might say, no, actually, I've changed my mind. I don't want to sell to you because you can't get your act together. So this could have all been avoided if each investor and the searcher had independent legal advice from the beginning.
Some searchers may or will push back and say independent legal counsel is just an added cost they can't justify at this stage. What would you say to them?
Also, they haven't spoken to us yet because, as I mentioned right at the beginning of this podcast, talk to lawyers early. Any lawyer worth their salt will not be charging you a penny for a phone call, for an initial phone call, just to chat, to talk about the deal in generality. They won't cost you anything, zero. So have a chat, get to know them, get to know your lawyers. It's all about trust. And it's only at the point of you're ready to engage and get into the deal itself, then you have that open conversation with the lawyers in terms of fees and how they work. And if you're in the searcher space, and again, talk to other searchers about their experiences with lawyers, but you can negotiate an abort fee if the deal does fall over. You can have that chat up front and say, guys, I'm a searcher, I'm an individual, I don't have the funds to pay your fees, but if on an abort, and most law firms in this space we will anyway. I can't speak for other lawyers, but definitely we will talk to you and consider it and come to a fair arrangement. Additionally, put in those costs, your legal costs, in your investment round. When you're raising funds, make sure that you've covered your legal fees. So get a quote or get a few quotes and plug them into your spreadsheet, because most law firms, particularly us, will only charge you on closing of the deal. So you can be rest assured some may charge you monthly, but we'll charge you when the deal's done, when you have the money. So no, I'll push back on that and say it will not. In fact, as I mentioned, it will probably decrease fees, then increase your total liability.
Just as well, you've discussed recently on LinkedIn that separate representation can actually reduce friction between searchers and investors rather than create it. Can you explain the thinking behind that?
In my experience, if you set the parameters from the outset about how you're entering into negotiations, not only will the sellers respect you going forward, but your investors will as well. You don't want to be a doormat. You want to be able to be a sophisticated professional individual. Sophisticated professional individuals obtain legal representation. Simple as that. It shows you're thinking about things, you're considered, and it gives you more gravitas, particularly in your negotiations with your investors, but also with the potential target. And it creates that more balanced relationship with your investors as well. You're someone who will not be taken advantage of. Your investors will get lawyers, as obviously, because they've suggested their own, but at least it levels that playing field and both sides know what to expect when going into negotiations. Also, they'll know that you're not asking for unreasonable requests because you've got professionals on your side that are really been there, done that, and it can make the negotiation, it should make the negotiation smoother. And you avoid all that awkward potential conflict that we've spoken about.
Just as a final question, if a searcher is listening to this right now and their investor has already floated the idea of sharing a solicitor, what's the one thing you'd want them to do before agreeing to it?
I want them to do a few things. Firstly, carefully consider that request from the investor and really dig into why they're asking and why they're suggesting they use the same. And if it's a cost point, ignore that because that's not true. The second one would be ask the law firm meet the law firm they're suggesting and actually ask that law firm how they intend to manage the conflict. How do they intend to deal with this issue? I'd be very interested to understand what they will say because they can't, is long and short of it. And thirdly, and finally, the search community is very collegiate, very sharing. So ask other searchers, some that you know personally or on community databases, on WhatsApps and whatnot, and ask, has anyone else had this experience? And you will get responses, and people will be very willing to share their experiences. And I'd be very interested to see what their answers are. But ultimately, don't take it at face value. What your investor says is fact. Always question and talk to a lawyer. And again, it's free to talk to a lawyer, so don't be worried about the cost. It's free to have a conversation. That's the one takeaway I'd like listeners to hear is it is always free to pick up the phone to a lawyer and ask them, can they help? What do you think? In fact, lose credibility if you don't do that in the market.
Thank you very much. A big thank you to Bryan for sharing such a practical and important perspective for the searcher community. The key takeaway is clear. Independent legal advice isn't an optional extra. It's one of the most important investments you can make in protecting your position. If you would like to speak to Bryan directly, you can find him on the Fox Williams website and on LinkedIn. The details will be below. And if you found this episode useful, please do share it with anyone in your network who's going through the search process right now. Thank you for listening to another episode of Forward Thinking.